Okay, we'll bring the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And first item that we should have is the approval of previous minutes.
I move to approve the meetings as minutes, is that what you said?
Minutes.
Minutes of the meeting from the 15th. I made some comments back there.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, so the agenda that was,
Is somebody taking minutes tonight?
Go ahead.
I offer, because it's going to be short.
Yeah, go ahead.
so the agenda that we had online tonight, we may not get to simply because we don't have a full contingency of our pro people. We only have one here tonight. And we have some issues to discuss as far as the future meetings and how we end up the reports that we're looking for. So I have an issue with the next 2 Thursdays after this. I'll be out of town. And I was hoping that the panel would work toward their end reports during that 2-week period, and we would reconvene on, I believe it's 19th of January. And the message can be sent to the Board of Selectmen that we're asking for a little additional time to finish up the business here. So, you want to toss that around?
So just skip the next 2 Thursdays, or the subgroups could get together and work on the outlines and instead of meeting as a group, instead of having a meeting. It works for me.
Yeah, works for me.
Yeah.
One thing I want to suggest during that period, relative to tonight even, I don't think we'll have more than 2 opponent people here, assuming that Warren doesn't get better in a hurry, and I won't be in the country, so we'll be operating. I think it's okay to operate short, just I can be called by email and so forth, or I can contribute by email. I think what a lot of we may have to do between now and then is writing. You can do that by exchange of emails.
Can we put you on Skype or something? You can Skype.
We can Skype in, but there's 13-hour differences, so we have to be careful what time of the night we get that.
Is it Skype? You're Skyping from California. You have to skip them.
Yeah, Skyping's possible.
Not here, it's lousy wires here. I've checked it a couple times.
Well, open meeting.
I don't think
Yeah,
they're
no, you're
allowed
really
electronic
close.
meetings yet.
Yeah, I think,
It's just got past cable.
Because the panel was organized in essentially in an adversarial way, we do have this strange structure that I think we have to be aware of. Right now, Jaimie's the only person on the other side. I think we've come a lot more toward the middle than we were at the beginning, but we still are constituted along those lines. And right now, Jaimie's outnumbered 3-1, and there's a potential for Joanne and me to be outnumbered 2-4 if everybody shows up on the other side. Jim's been contributing a lot for the other side. So, I think as we have to be aware of that tonight with Jaimie, I think the other side will have to be aware of that if we do get into a 4-2 situation, especially if issues are getting a little contentious, that there just aren't four voices filling up the room, or tonight 3 voices versus a smaller number on the other side. So I think we just have to be cognizant as we go forward. Okay, this isn't exactly how it was constituted to end up with 4 on one side. And I hope that we can all be respectful of outnumbering each other. If Jim's, and we've asked Jim to do the process, so I think that's, he's contributing a lot, and he probably will be doing some of the work with Chris on portions of this. So he obviously has been given a voice. And again, I just hope we can keep fairness in mind.
And I might add to that, Ken, I think that's where your role as moderator can be quite helpful to all of us, to help us balance out the airtime and which voices are heard.
But ideally, we'll have talked with each other, at least within our subgroups, about what we're writing up. And so there won't be any issues there. It's just going to be about how to constitute the final report, I think, that could come up. And what finally gets into the report.
I have something here from Renee.
Before you go, are we all set with the plan then, or we're gonna skip the next 2 Thursdays and
You
the
wanna get to that
subgroups?
now?
I thought we were discussing
Yeah.
it. So I just want to clarify that, so.
Do we have consensus?
Yeah.
I'm fine with it.
All right, let's make it a motion. I move that the meeting, next meeting is January 19th, but there's a lot of work done offline by written exchanges before that.
Second.
Any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Guess that answers it.
All right, no, that's fine.
Okay. I just want to follow up here with this that I got from Renee Lava from Mass Audubon, and it's a bit short. And there were questions that were raised that weren't answered at last meeting, and so it starts out, following up on last work meeting, here are some responses to some questions that were raised. Information on Mass Audubon's involvement in wind energy policy and project reviews is available on our website at www.massaudubon.org/wind. Projects vary in scale and the local resources affected, so our position and comments depend on various factors. We don't comment on all projects, but do review those that abut Mass Audubon land or are large in scale, such as the Cape Wind project, which we support following nearly a decade of intensive environmental review. Regarding the definition of biomap core habitat, the Lenox site is in core area BM 677, according to the feasibility study, is explained on the biomap website, again, www.mass.gov/bunch of stuff. It'll go into the stuff. This goes on and on, DFW, et cetera, et cetera. I can make copies of this if anybody who wants it.
Do you have it electronic with the
I do, so that I can give it to others. Did
Did
you have it not finished reading it?
If you could summarize it, that
I haven't read it myself to summarize, so I'd have to
keep
read
reading.
it.
I think it's
Okay, so in other words, this goes on to list what impacted by roads development, et cetera. This doesn't necessarily mean they are completely free of all roads, particularly unpaved roads. So that has to do with the biohab. And then the next paragraph is regarding additional studies, and I think this is the meat of it, studies of effects on soil, vegetation, and wetlands. That is something that would need to be scoped out based on more specific information about the proposed location of the turbines, access road improvement, and transmission line route. Wetlands would need to be delineated by a professional wetlands consultant, and field surveys should also be done to identify any vernal pools or intermittent streams in or near the proposed work, since there may be resources on the ground that are not shown on available maps. Field surveys for rare species might also need to be conducted by qualified wildlife biologists. The Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program and the Lenox Conservation Commission should be consulted regarding the scope of the work for those studies. The town water department should also be involved given the location on town watershed land. Mass Audubon would like to be kept in the loop on scoping and results of any studies, but our ecological extension service would not be in a position to work for the town on that, as we are abutters. And he signs it.
That does spell out a little better what would have to be done. That
From their point of view.
And I think it's really in the Jaimie
Yeah, falls into our bucket.
and
So if you have that in an email form or electronic form, that'd be great. Jaimie and I can work
Yeah,
that
I
in.
can follow
Yeah,
that.
you can email it, that would be great.
Or it's an appendix or whatever, however we decide to handle this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, seeing how we're light-handed here tonight, we're probably not going to get a lot of time. So, I'm throwing this to you guys. What do you want to do?
I'd like to suggest we keep trying to move. If Jaimie's uncomfortable, we'll stop. But, I don't think we're going to make any decisions that are, necessarily going to be what we have to do is decide how to get the work done in the next few weeks, and I think if we work on, I did send this outline to everybody, I'd just like to see if there's comments that people want to make on it. And that might give us a way to work forward from here and to the 19th.
Where did you begin?
And Channing did a draft outline too. Did you happen to print that out for tonight?
So that was for our
Just for the
session.
subgroup, so this is more for the overall.
Well,
yeah.
here attached is 2 pages, so I have on the second page a sub-issue report outline. So when we get to that, maybe we'll, some of the Chan did can influence that. So what I did was I wrote on the first page the overall, not the overall, an overall start. And it has, if you look at it, the third and fourth bullets, or third, fourth, so forth bullets are sub-issues in areas like finance, health effects, environmental. So it has the 3 sub-issues as headings on this overall report. So it adds to those sub-issues kind of a scope statement saying what we studied and what we did and how we did it, just kind of briefly. And then an overall findings, that might be hard, but it's extracted a little bit from the 3 sub-issues. And we'll see what we can do. Then the 3 sub-issues. Then some sections that I think need to be discussed. Assessment of the Western report. I have a draft of something I wrote. I sent it to Jim, but he hasn't been able to comment yet, so it's just my version. And some statements on possible future technology and regulatory developments. And then I thought there'd be a section that would be called future work needed if project was to be approved. In other words, if we're going to keep going on what's the future work, and I think we just got some input on that, on one little segment of that from Audubon. It would be a summary of all the future work. That was my thought. And then the last section, I want to spend a couple minutes on here. I call overall recommendations, but I've said here, these might include one separate 1 page or less, keep them to a page, in other words. Sort of recommendations and rationale by each one of us. In other words, each one of us would be responsible for writing what we think ought to happen, okay, on a 1-page basis. I don't think these are going to agree with each other. They're still going to be different. But I think that would be a way at least to keep, and maybe some of these other sections end up with, 2 different reports or sub-reports as part of them. I don't know that yet, but it could. Clearly this last one, I'm anticipating will.
So you see this last section as separate statements for
Yeah,
each
personal
panel
statements.
member,
Panel
rather
members,
than an attempt to form a consolidated view across.
Yeah. Out of that might come a consolidated view, I don't know. And one of the thoughts I have, to be honest, going forward the next 2 weeks is that each one of us try to write what we think on the 1 page. I don't know if that's acceptable to others and so forth. Before the 19th, that each of us write a 1 page or less summary of what we would recommend and why.
What's less than 1 page? What's less than 1 page?
Well, some people would be about that one.
No,
If we had the separate, if we all wrote something and then would we merge them into, like, if we find that, there's agreement amongst several people, do we kind of just integrate it into the report? Is that what you're thinking?
Frankly,
Or these are just kind of like separate pages or whatever?
Frankly, Jamie, that would be ideal if after writing the 6 of them, we could come down with a 2-page total, okay? That we all, we don't agree with everything, but we agree with enough to say that's okay. But I also see the possibility you're gonna get slightly different or different views in that, and they'll stay different. And the selectmen will have to read all 5 of them, or 6 of them, or 4 of them, or 7 of them, I don't know. That's how I see it, but I don't know how it'll turn out until we try it.
Did anyone get a chance to see was it the Bethany, New York? Did you look at the I mean, that was incredibly thick.
Yeah,
It was like 63 pages.
63 pages in 2 years.
That was
Yeah.
about
We had 2 months and
So what's that?
6
What's-
pages?
What's the
Or
Who's an advisor on that?
Well, presumably, if more than two of us worked on a statement, we've already got an open meeting law issue, right?
No, I think it's a quorum or
No,
more.
two isn't.
I thought
No,
four.
but if one side were to work together on a
Three or
statement.
fewer is less than a quorum and it's a
Okay.
Well,
quorum.
I like what Chris is working on over here with a one-page or some kind of a brief summation for each person, and then maybe take those and and delegate one person from each of the sides to take those together. You know, I mean, that might
That'd
work
be an
as a
interesting-
way
Yeah.
to
That would start down the path. and
to
you
bring
see how far
summation
we
to the
get.
reports.
Mhm.
Yeah, and, I don't know, how you want to hear a little bit.
Well, can we just keep going for a moment, please? I think that one of the additions I'd like to see in the outline, Chris, I think this is pretty, from my point of view, pretty workable outline. But I think there are issues that we haven't covered and won't cover in the report. Legal,
Tourism.
yeah, legal, tourism, there, other towns that are affected by this, we have, you know, should be made mention that there are at least two other towns that are directly impacted by this. And the implementation into the grid, I think at least we need to note that there are things we're not covering. I mean, we won't have spoken to National Grid, we won't know what really is required, and we won't really know what the contract would be ultimately.
Well, where the my feeling is the sub-issues are gonna address some of those things as well, so that it'll come out in those sections that will help kind of define the overall report, you know.
Why didn't I guess I wasn't sure how legal or grid implementation, or a mention of the other towns, how that was gonna be. I guess other towns could come under our environmental, and, you know, if you consider the visual impacts and
Well, if there's health concerns, you know,
We
the
have
other
both.
towns, you know,
Right.
there are things that, like the border is somewhat,
well, I guess maybe it would have to come under recommendations then, of whether we feel like other towns, you know, need to have a voice in this or be allowed to.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite sure how to work it in, because I hadn't really thought of it, except in the scope, I did at least say we didn't study these, but.
Right.
But that's all.
Yeah, I think it's just saying, these are the things we haven't really delved into. Legal is not something that we'll really get into,
Channing,
that I can see. Is there, in anybody's bucket, can we cover the legal?
I covered it because of the financial implications.
So you're
And-
mentioning that that's not in
And it-
there as yet, and
Well, I
and
covered
what the
it,
legal potentials are or aren't?
I did not list the legal issues, I merely noted that there was no line item expense built into the pro forma for legal costs.
Right.
And the same thing with integration with the grid. Integration with the grid directly impacts the likelihood of the financial result.
Right.
If we can't easily integrate with the grid and get the grid, you know, ISO New England to accept what we produce, it directly impacts, it's almost a showstopper in terms of the end financial result.
Right.
Same thing about getting the utilities to purchase the power for any net excess generation. So some of those issues are reflected or will be reflected in the financial subgroup report through, you know, the dollar lens.
So you'd be mentioning potential liability and,
The need for liability insurance without
Yeah.
scoping out what the liability might be or
right.
other sizing factors that might impact the numbers.
Right.
I think it would be helpful to, I think this, the overall outline is a good start, and I think getting back to the subgroup, the sub-issue reports, you know, I think will help build it. And, you know, if we realize, okay, we've, you know, something like the grid interconnect, you know, that wasn't in one of the sub-issue reports, we should, you know, have something on there, and,
Okay.
you know, just to kind of keep track of these other findings, or if there are no findings, just other issues that might come up, that we should just make sure that there's something, a paragraph or just something mentioned about it, whether we studied it or not, or have any answers, to that effect, so.
Okay. See where we are when we're done. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go, Shannon. And because even if, 2 or 3 of us mention it, there may be a dimension of an issue that doesn't get addressed that's really important that get noted.
And presumably there'll be appendices. We won't list everything in the middle of the report.
Yeah, I think different attachments
Yeah.
or.
And I think, I always write outlines, but they never stay the same when I write a report, so I mean, it's just a guideline
Yeah.
to start to work as much as anything. And so my thought, and I think Ken's suggestion on, I guess there's 2 ways to start the work. One is to write, each of us to work alone to write a 1-pager, but the other one is to keep working in our teams to get the sub-issue reports done. We had those 2 items, and then Ken had this idea of taking the 6 1-pagers and making a lead person on each side. Which one could change in somewhere, just to say there's a lead person on each side, they pull that together and they maybe begin to be the quarterbacks for the whole report. And look at the sub-issues.
That makes
I
sense.
don't know, and it can change,
And decide who writes the introduction or any
Yeah, ask somebody,
later on.
would you take a shot at the introduction and give it back to the 2 of us?
I think we can get it done.
Yeah.
I think you can get a lot done by the 19th of January if we keep working. But
How do you feel about it, Jamie? Because you're the lone person in your team.
I feel like, I think I mentioned, I think it's fine. I did have a question about the future work, just the one section here, about the future work needed if project is to be approved. Because again, I think some of that's gonna come out in the subgroups as well, of what else should be done before there's even an approval. I don't see, I guess I just need a clarification from you what you meant by that, because.
I just think, and what you said is correct. I see a lot of it coming out of the sub-issue.
Okay.
But I see potentially other things that I guess it's the same concern that Channing has. I see things that might not be a sub-issue. I may be wrong, they may all come out of the sub-issues, but in fact, I took a stab at that, but we'll get to that later for the time. I mean, just my stab of future. But I think, I guess the next 2 steps, I still go back to trying to write our 1-pagers and trying to start get these things, and then just see, and maybe some of these sections aren't even needed, or they're needed even more, I don't know.
Okay,
We don't have to approve the outline or anything, this is just a starting point. We'll just
start.
send out the minutes, and the
Nothing binding
other,
about it.
the other folks who couldn't be here tonight will
I'll attach this to the minutes.
get their assignments.
I get their assignments electronically.
Joanne, is it your impression that finance is really a big topic here? It covers a lot of ground. Do you anticipate getting into the issues of whether or not, what happens if the solar field goes in?
Yes.
And we are now in the energy market, selling energy as opposed to generating energy for the town?
Actually, some of the sensitivity testing I've done tries to sort of tease out what the impact would be. And I've asked Eric to take a look at it, so I should get a view back from him as well.
Will you also be covering whether or not there's a Commonwealth grant? Will we know whether there's a Commonwealth grant available if
Yeah.
we're not generating for the town?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think we haven't heard that answer yet, have we?
Yeah, if it's a town-done project, we're eligible for another $400,000 through the Clean Energy Center for a design construction grant. But I don't know
Are you talking about the solar, or are you talking about the wind?
Wind.
when, and I don't know if the same applies to the solar.
But what I mean is if we're not, is it tied to generating power for the town? Can we also qualify for grants if we're if we're generating power to sell into the grid.
I don't know, where we're not using it as for, where it's not used for, you
Yeah,
know,
let's
to
say
offset
let's say the
municipal
solar
use.
field is covering,
I don't know the
covering the
answer to
needs of the town, and now the town decides to go ahead and build windmills. Now we're basically generating energy to sell into the market
Mhm.
at presumably, I don't know if the rate changes, I don't know what grants are available, so I just wonder if we need a section that references the potential for solar to be in operation long before the windmills would go up, if they go up at all.
We
And
could,
what impact, let me say it better, what impact a solar installation that's pumping energy into the town and into the grid has on the decision to build turbines?
I think we could make some comments about that from what we've learned.
Yeah, because the solar, if it's a PPA or power purchase agreement, I mean, the town wouldn't actually own it anyway, so it would be
Right.
a lease.
Right.
And so it, so that may affect things too, you know,
Yeah.
if it's owned by an independent company.
Yeah, I just don't know, I don't know what impact it has either way, actually, positive or negative to have a solar field in operation.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
It might be an open, might be a question we end up.
It might be
with
a
open.
question we just leave open to,
Okay.
but we might be able to learn a little bit more between now and.
My feeling is
January.
that, and I don't know as much about this as Joanne, I just overhear some of the phone calls, that there is a lot of uncertainty in the finance for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them, is exactly, well, first of all, what happens in future regulations, but also what happens when we get solar and what happens to all these other agreements, so it's just part of the uncertainty.
Yeah, because we don't know what National Grid's going to do on it is either, right?
We don't know what bids would get if we did it, we don't, you know, there's just a lot of stuff. I mean, it's clear in Weston, what they did was a very,
Well, if you don't get to it in the finance report, I think that's something we would want to break out.
Chris is right, it just complicates an already fairly risky and uncertain set of circumstances. And if we do nothing more, perhaps we can call out the questions
Right.
that sort of also impinge on this project as a result of moving forward with solar.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if it's necessary to say too much about it because of that uncertainty, but also, you know, even if, I mean, I think it's gonna still be, you know, months or years before, it seems like before a decision would be made, you know, because there are so many studies that we all feel like that we need to do with related to the wind project. I think, you know, if the solar field is installed, it could be online, you know, middle of next year or, you know, in the fall or at some point, and so it's, you know, it could impact the decision of the wind, you know, down the road, so, or we don't know the answer to that yet, so. Yeah. Spend time where you will have more knowns. There are knowns and there are unknowns.
So we've made a couple of decisions here so far as meetings go and reports. There's one thing I'd like to bring up, per Adele Rabbits, our sustainability coordinator. She's getting a tremendous amount of information to post on the site, and apparently it's cumbersome when it comes through in anything other than PDF for her. So that's why there's a little lag between what she's got.
I'm sure what you've been a PDF, but that's.
Well, she's telling me that some of the stuff that she's
Some
getting.
of it maybe, but.
And I would, you know, caution the redundancy of information.
Yeah, no, that's all right, she should not do it.
Well, I'd like to actually bring up the difference between the website submissions and the library submissions. I guess I was operating under the notion that anything that we were going to publicly post was something that we'd all agreed on, and I didn't really realize there was going to be a difference between what we were putting up on the website and what we were going to decide to put into the library. So is this just an open bucket to throw everything in that we think applies to the decision, or?
Well, apparently to follow what you're talking about, apparently there was information put on the website that wasn't generated from the panel, that came from I believe, Dell. And she hadn't gotten the memo that it had to come through the panel. So I think what I would suggest is for all panel members to go to the website and see what's there.
Does she know that she should not be posting anything anymore?
Yes.
Did she take down what we
I
didn't
don't know, I
approve?
can't tell you that yet.
And I guess I want to stop with the word approve a little bit, because you know, it's a matter of, I would like it at least to come through the committee, okay, through the panel. Whether we have to have a debate on everything that gets put on there is another thing to me. I mean,
We haven't talked about anything except on the website, as far as I know.
no, that's right. Well, some of it is stuff that I've sent to members of the committee, just here's some papers. And some of it is, I don't know where it came from, frankly. In other words, it might have come from you, maybe, I don't know.
But if it comes through if it comes to this meeting, to this panel, then it's basically part of the,
Right.
it's part of the public record,
But
so.
apparently
So that could just go up without approval or whatever. I mean, you know,
Yeah, there were things that came up, there were things that went up that never came in here.
Mhm.
And I asked where they had come from, and she took a while to answer them, but she did find them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think those should be taken down until they come through.
And somebody here wants to bring them in and say, okay, it's different, but, you know,
The
it's
way
just-
that's the process, that's what I understood.
No.
I think that's the way it should, I mean, I think they should at least be in front of a quorum before they go up on the website.
How do
And
we
then
do
like-
that? How do we do that if we're not meeting for 2 months? Because there's
I
probably,
can work on that, even though that
I think there's probably 3 things that I asked Adele in the last, at least one, the Ben Loose slide deck to put up that I don't think had come here for approval. Or
Approvals on-
not, well, had come here
Awareness.
to be,
For aware-
for
be part of the
awareness,
record.
to be part of the record. And we're not meeting for 2 more weeks, and, you know, there's a couple of other, 3 more weeks, and there's a couple of other things that I think would be helpful to have out there.
Well, and frankly, the stuff I brought in here that's still not posted, I brought in here over a month ago. You know, so it's a big backlog and stuff that we put out.
So my question is, does anything any of us suggest be put up sufficient, or does it need to come here first? If it comes from one of us, even outside the meeting, is that acceptable?
To be part of the record, or to be, just to be on the website?
To be on the website.
I think it depends, I think, you know, echo what Chris said, I mean, I think, you know, whatever's gonna go up there should just, you know, come to a meeting, and when there's quorum, and people should just have an opportunity to, and then there's no question, you know, if it comes to a meeting, I think. Because I think if we're just putting things up there, there may be the assumption that, oh, okay, this is sort of approved, or is part of the public record, or everybody,
That's fine.
you know,
Everybody's seen it.
everybody's seen it, or, you know, whether you agree with it or not, you know, at least you have the opportunity to kind of look at it, be aware of it before it goes up there.
Is the assumption that what's on the website coming from this panel, and I believe that's what it is, then I would go along with what Jamie's saying, that everything should come from the panel at first,
That's
the first
fine.
part.
There's so much information out there.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be at least recognized by the panel before it goes up.
And that would cut down on, if you've got independent people throwing stuff at it, you're gonna get a lot of that, you know, repetition. I mean, I don't think that's really necessary. So,
Are you comfortable with the list that I brought 2 weeks ago, all those materials going up? That was the list. I'm asking
I don't remember.
I don't remember a list.
I brought it here, it was on the agenda, we didn't get to it. It was a list of items.
Okay, so it's not even a minute. Yeah, I'm not comfortable because I don't remember what it was. I don't remember the list. So, like, it's hard for me to say yes or no at
So-
this point, so.
I don't know where we're gonna start then, because I don't, other than 2 or 3 articles that I specifically listed, 3 articles I listed in the minutes, it was the only thing that's part of the official record to be posted.
Like, is it critical that is the timing critical that it gets up there in the next couple of weeks? I mean, is it gonna?
Then let's
and-
strip everything out.
Well, it's not critical.
yeah,
Well, we
I mean,
should bring everything down that's up then.
If it hasn't gone through this committee.
Right.
Well, that we agreed.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think we
skinny's
agreed
back
on
to
that
3,
anyway.
it's skinny's back to only 3 articles then.
No, somebody, do we have a set of the minutes to make sure whatever articles have come through the minutes have been mentioned in the minutes, then we should put them up.
I get it.
I'll look at my minutes, but I think there were some others.
Okay,
But that should be the only ones up. There's probably a handful of them.
there's just a few.
And the audit bond letters.
Well, and there was some testimony from the audience here. I think that she put up some stuff that people had given in here, which I think is appropriate.
The letter from Richard Town.
For example. I
Right,
noticed that.
that's up, and that's actually up.
Okay, where we at?
All right. So we'll,
Can I
call
go,
the notes and
can
then.
we
get
talk
right
about the
back.
sub-issue report for a minute? Shan, you apparently had something together relative to yours at least, I don't know.
Oh, no,
This doesn't have to be followed either, it was just what I'm gonna try to do with Michael.
no, this is essentially, I thought what Jaimie and I would end up doing, we shared a back and forth, an outline of the stuff that we were gonna cover.
Yours is the hardest to me to think about, because it's got a lot of pieces, you know, so, I mean, I'm not saying it's any different, but it does have a lot of pieces.
Well, it does have a lot of pieces, but I think that, as Jaimie and I both discussed, that a lot of it comes down to having studies done by qualified experts in a lot of these areas. So, you know, a lot of, you know, when it gets down to wetlands and vernal pools and wildlife and archaeologic and that sort of thing, all the water issues. Somebody's gonna have to come and do those studies. So I don't think, I think we can do ours pretty well, don't you, Jaimie? We put it together pretty
I think so, yeah.
neatly, yeah. And we will be following, generally following, I think, this outline.
Something like it, anyway.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's not a straight jacket, that's for sure.
I see, frankly, I see the financial piece being probably the most complicated. You've got to get a lot of information across, you and Eric, and the medical, I think we sort of almost know where the medical piece is going to stand with you and Michael, don't you think, Chris?
Yeah, I don't know, I'll send Michael a draft, and we'll see how it goes, but,
Yeah, so we have
one
now-
meeting, I thought Michael and I were gonna write the same report, the next meeting I wrote two, so, you know, so
I wouldn't go that far.
I was a little more separate.
So I guess the answer is yes, we have an outline, and we will, we'll follow the outline and see where it goes, and probably split it up, or one of us take a crack at it, and the other one do the rewrite.
Right. And Ken, do we need to go to the selectmen and meeting and, request an extension, or how does that work?
Yeah, I would do that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able.
Well, I know you're not gonna be there, I was,
But you should do it just to be official, that you're going past the January.
because I was planning to go next Wednesday to the selectmen's meeting, so if,
I'll go with you.
All right.
I generally try to attend.
Okay, just, the two of them, they'll make a request just to.
yeah, so we can request an extension. How much more, I mean, if we're not meeting for a few weeks, and then we're gonna meet the 19th, and we're gonna go over the sub, I mean, do we wanna just ask for like another month or something, just to give us some more time to finalize everything, or?
Yeah, because Groundhog Day's in there,
It's a leap year too, so we gotta be careful.
The 19th, we all reconvene, we'll ideally have a lot of work done.
Right.
That'll be the test, how much is that?
I mean, I'd like to see you wrap this up on January 26th, actually.
final meeting here, and then when the report to the
And then that
select.
report would go to the next selectmen's meeting, whenever that is. I'm off the schedule, so I'm not sure when it would be. Having,
So the 20th, so you'd like to have a final
So the next one-
report from the committee by the 26th of January?
I think you should be able to do that.
When's the next select board meeting after the 26th
Well,
of
I
January?
believe if they're meeting on the 4th, the next one would be the
So it's
18th.
the first, so we still have, almost another week to refine. Okay, I think that's probably doable.
Well, we have to, I mean, we can't make any edits after we approve it though, right? I mean, we have to, as a committee, do we have to agree and?
Yeah,
We can't really wordsmith it after we've already said, okay, this is the report. Now let's go take it home and make some more changes. So that's why,
it's not the first, then it's the.
I think if we,
Next meeting is the 15th, I mean, sorry, yeah, 15th of February.
why don't we just, is it the first and third Wednesdays of the month you meet, or is it?
It's every 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's every other week, but then we skipped, so that it threw into a different
Okay.
schedule than what I have in mind. The 4th and 18th, and the next one would be
The
the
first,
1st. So you would be asking until the 15th for?
I think, and given that, I think we should just say
Okay.
15th.
I'm sure they're not gonna have to.
And I think this group can still try to have something pretty done on the 26th.
Yeah.
I think that's still a right target.
yeah, I mean, we should definitely shoot for
So
having it
first,
done.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. You're right, we have to
Yeah.
we have to be able to approve it.
Second or final, and then if we have to have one more meeting just to finalize it, we'd still, the 15th would give us time to do that.
Right.
February 15th, so when Channing and I go to the selectmen next week, that's what we'll ask for, is extension to the 15th.
And I wouldn't promise them that get one totally unified report. There might still be pieces of it that there's differences.
They have set reports.
Yeah, not totally separate, but.
Well, I think it'll be our final report, though.
Yeah, it'll be all part of the report. It'll
Right.
be stronger pro and stronger opposing or whatever points.
All right. So now where are we?
I have one other thing, since this is my last attendance meeting, I have something that may be more controversial, but I'll pass it
Oh, good.
on.
It's going too easy.
I'll pass that around, and I'll pass a group of them around to, I don't know how many can be shared, but. These are strictly mine, they have my name down bottom, so I'm not saying they're anything like a consensus, they're not. They could be disagreed among the opposing side as much as among the pro and opposing. I do have I have a draft one page of further recommended work for the Lenox turbines, which is strictly my point of view, and I want to cover that. Then I will talk a little bit about the Weston report, which again is my own particular rant, perhaps. But on the further recommended work for the Lenox, I'm a little different than I think most of all the committee probably, in that I don't think the finance is the first question. My view of the first question is, are we actually going to save any energy with these turbines if we build them? Are we going to do any real CO2 reduction? And I would really like to see an independent assessment of that, because I think there's at least pretty good indications in the literature that with the way we are trying to couple to the grid today, we don't really get savings. And it was a big surprise to me in this whole study. And these studies out of Europe. So that would be one thing I would recommend is further work. I would also think the health effects, I just think there's, and we've talked here about doing further acoustical studies. I don't think they are very meaningful from what I've seen, but you could get a recommended for independent acoustical and health experts, study this further, and just really look at the potential for negative health effects on Lenox and Richmond residents. I really think these are two very important things to do before as a select board, you should say go ahead. I think the watershed impacts may get to that level. get an independent hydrologist, maybe a geologist, looking at the damage that might occur to the town's water supply due to the construction of operational wind turbines. I think those three things, if they're all positive in the sense that there are real savings, there are not real risks to health, there's not risk to the watershed, then I think you really ought to, the financial stuff can get done heavily. So that's how I do this in phase 1 and phase 2. And that's what I want to at least say.
Bring it to every bucket.
Well, that's right, but I think the more work could be done in these 2 phases, and that's my further work kind of thinking. It's not the same as the rest of the committee, and that's why I wanted to at least write it down before I left Monday morning on the airplane. We had discussed this, or it's just input that I'd like in the minutes. Okay, that's really what
So you'd like to see the whole thing put into the...
Well, the first page is that. The next page is, yes, I would also like,
Document added to the...
I would like it added to the minutes, yeah. Can be made into a PDF.
That would be helpful.
I'll do that. But then the next thing I had, and this is not likely to be as, the first one I might get some agreement to. The second one, although there might be more agreement here on the opposed, there wouldn't be as much agreement on the pro. And that's my assessment of the Weston interaction. And it's a long document, so I'm not going to try to have you read it all. It's 4 pages, but. I really don't think much of that report or that help. I think it's very misleading to the town the way it was presented. The technical basis of it's not very deep. A lack of credentials, a lack of real names on the report. The fact that the SODAR report meant nothing almost when we asked Dan Ingold. So SODAR is good, but you need a Met tower, which is where the town was 6 years ago. And I don't see any forward motion on that. And then just on one little subject, in a sense, during the presentation, or after the presentation, I asked about gearbox failures, mainly because one of my students had worked in the wind industry for a summer and told me the gearboxes break all the time. It cost €500,000 to fix and take months out of the operation. I asked him about it. He said, oh, they either break right away or they don't break at all. And I said, would you give me some hard data? Because I told him about the student. He then, 3 weeks later, answered me and sent me an answer on the gearbox failure, which, let me quote from it. He said, let me get it for, be careful here. He came back. After he said that, okay, then he said, he replied on December 6th. He was here on November 10th, and I wrote him, I asked it then, and I repeated it in an email the next day. But he replied on December 6th by sending some information to use in an unsuccessful proposal to build wind turbines on Cape May. And the information he sent wasn't detailed. There was no actual data. It was just projections. And it was, only reference was to a talk, not a paper, by someone who, sort of unknown, a Wind Energy Association spokesman. And so it fell way short of the actual evidence. But what bothered me more was that he did not reference a very large program being run by the National Renewable Energy Lab, which I didn't know about when I asked the question, frankly. Somebody who lives in my house found it in the meantime. And because of the cost implications of the gearboxes she was looking at, she just found. And it's a National Renewable Energy Lab. That's the national lab with most responsibility for solving critical renewable energy problems. They have an enormous program aimed at solving the gearbox durability problem. I started asking about everyone in the industry is working on it. It's a good sign there's a significant problem usually. Inquiries about the program indicated everyone in the industry knows about the program. and the serious nature of the Dearborn Borough building program. Well, everybody in the industry knew that Mr. Dingell apparently, so I just don't find that very credible kind of answer. And I go on in a couple other areas here that they aren't as clear, that I still haven't got answers on several other things after a month and a half. So, in general, these reports are set up too. If you go back and look at what Falmouth was told or anybody else, they're kind of set up by the state agency pushing this stuff to kind of move a certain way. And I really think they mislead towns. And so I just want to say, I hope this time isn't misled by that. And I think if you go for it at any point, please really get an independent assessment. Like somebody will put a professional engineering name on it so that they can, if they say something that can't be defended, they can be disrobed, frankly. And that's why there's no name on the report. Anyhow, end of rant.
Okay. Have you found any reports on gearbox failure, some sort of,
Well, the National Renewable Energy
What are
Lab,
they saying about this?
oh, there's 50-page reports. I think I tried to post them. Let's see if they got posted.
2 cents.
They're careful. They just say they fail by all sorts of mechanisms. There's all sorts of detail. It's a very detailed technical, and they're very careful to say that it's a big problem and the cost is too high. I mean, they're spending about 20 cents a kilowatt hour to keep these gearboxes in repair. Now that's, we want to pay less than 10 for electricity, so it's a problem. They don't say whose gearbox, every gearbox manufacturer, every wind turbine manufacturer is in the consortium. So they all, I happen to know enough about designing gearboxes because I did it in cars, and I know how tough it is, and I know how complex the lubrication and the heating problems and the stresses, and these are sitting up in the air with the bending stress. It's a nightmare engineering. I'm not saying you can't solve it. You can, and I'm happy to see, frankly, a group working on it, because it means that progress will be made. But if they have a big report, this last report was in, and you remember July of 2011, it's fairly
Yeah, I
recent.
think it was.
And it recommends more work's needed because we haven't been able to prove out any of the solutions, and and this looks like it works, and that looks like it doesn't work. So it's good engineering work moving down a path, but it doesn't say we're done, we got it done.
I think it's come up a lot during our meeting. We talked about the gearboxes, and we know that Princeton went down like in their first year of operation or something, and so we've had many
In fact, I remember
comments from the audience, from Tom, from Lee, talking about direct drive, and so I think we.
But
Well,
Ingold
I think
said there was
there's
no
definitely-
problem, and he still said there's no problem, he kind of said there was no problem, and mailed me on December.
I do distinctly remember him saying that they usually fail. Right
Yeah, they
away.
do feel, hopefully,
Or did-
Warranty.
hopefully it fails when it's
Which was-
under warranty, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, which is,
Hopefully.
I don't know,
Or
I mean,
you
for
have
all,
insurance
for all of the
coverage.
things.
Yeah, service
I
contract.
have to be careful, I'm still a moderator.
And that's my rant. I believe, sincerely in my rant, but I don't want to make it.
Okay, well, thank you. More stuff to consider. So, do you want to turn over to, some?
Yeah, the public.
Let's
Do
do
that.
you have something else? You've got,
Do you have anything, Chief?
No, I was just curious about time.
Yeah, we're at 7, 10 to 7. You can go.
Yeah, I need to go in about
So,
15 minutes.
okay, bring it, start here in the front.
Hi, I'm Terry Flynn, and I'm just speaking strictly for myself tonight, but to me, when Chris was going through the problems, and I think the first one was CO2 reduction, to me, there's another question that I would like to see any town in the Berkshires consider right up front. And I guess the underlying assumption, another underlying question to this question is this really something we should be doing to any of our mountains? But the big question, the big question is to, maybe I shouldn't put it in the phrase of a question, something to be considered is that this isn't being done in a vacuum. If 20 other towns in the Berkshires decide to do a wind project and putting the turbines on the mountains, and they each have small wind farms, then what will happen is we will have this kind of natural, impact on the whole county. So each town naturally will tend to look at these from a point of view of, will it help us financially? Will it help defray, expenses for the taxpayer? And they'll look at other problems like, well, can we do it without hurting people's health? Can we do it, without harming the vernal pool or whatever else? But the other question to ask is, we're part of a region, and every town that moves to do this in this region is actually going to contribute to a momentum that will be devastating to the Berkshires. And so I think there is really a moral, well, to me, if I was selected, it would be a moral question as to whether or not I wanted to contribute to what will be great damage to these mountains. And, when there are other alternatives, even if all these topics were to come out and say, yes, the finances can work, and yes, it will help the taxpayer, and yeah, we can defray the health. I don't think any of those will come out that way with the Lenox project. But even if they did, it would be the wrong thing to do. And I would say that to any town in the whole region. And so I know that everyone won't agree with my view on that, but I think it really is the first question, is whether or not it's even something we should consider, regardless of all those other things that are naturally going to be your purview to study. So I'm really not trying to discount the way the committee's working, but I do think that any kind of a recommendation to any board of selectmen, or to any town meeting for that matter, should have that right up front, so that people have to confront that question and to realize that it's not only abutting towns that they're affecting all the people in this region. I just wanted to kind of put that in your hands.
Yeah, I'm Neil Pilson, resident of Richmond. I respect everything that Terry has said, but I'd like to address just a very fundamental issue for this committee, and that is that if your report is requested on January 26th, the list of uncertainties, and that was a word that we used just a few minutes ago, on all of these issues, and I made actually a list on the train coming up here, there are so many uncertainties that cannot be resolved between now and January 26th. Uncertainties with regard to ecology, with regard to health issues, with regard to destruction of the mountain, with regard to the financial issues that I think you have to deal with regard to wind itself as to whether it's an efficient provider of alternative energy. It seems to me that this committee can only report that there are so many uncertainties across the entire spectrum of wind energy that it's impossible for this committee to recommend that the town go forward with wind turbines. That isn't to say that at some point these uncertainties might be resolved, but the fact of the matter is there's more and more evidence as more and more of these turbines go in around the world that a lot of the uncertainties with respect to some of these medical issues are proving to be actually fact. So my point is, very briefly, that I can't see this committee, given the rather short period of time that you're being tasked to come back with your report, given the uncertainties that go across the entire spectrum of wind energy, and Terry's discussion of destruction to the mountain itself, which frankly is not an uncertainty. We've seen enough evidence that turbines on any ridgeline pose an enormous destructive impact right across with roads, construction, blasting, groundwater, possible impact, all of these uncertainties. It seems to me the committee, and I'm really addressing the people who have identified themselves as pro-turbine or pro-wind, that in this context, and as I was at the board meeting when the board tasked to say, please confine your recommendations to Lenox Mountain. That's what we need to resolve. And it seems to me there are so many issues that you will not be able to resolve between now and January 26th, that your report has to say there are simply too many uncertainties here for us to recommend to the town that we go forward with wind turbines.
Put that on one page, we're done.
Well, I can do that if requested.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Second row?
My name is Alan Kane, I'm from Richmond. I guess I want clarification on the question that Channing asked Joanne, which is, do you think in the financial section of the report that you will be in any way going to quantify the amount of litigation and how Lenox will be able to protect itself and what it will cost to litigate this?
That's what he's alluding to.
I couldn't get the answer. I didn't get the answer.
No, I don't think we'll be able to do that. I think what we'll be able to do is, because the uncertainty about how to even size that particular question. And we have no idea what kind of pushback or what would be required
Right.
at this stage to be able to size a litigation bucket.
Right, so you won't be able to.
No.
No, we can't do that.
That's just
Right, that's a fair. Thank you.
But it's a consideration.
It absolutely has to be called out as a question and a large open question.
My name is Ed Carter. I've been a resident of Lenox for 40 years. I have a degree in engineering, and I was an IBM executive for 39 years. I don't envy the job you guys are doing. It's pretty complicated. But I would agree with the statements made by the gentleman in the front row. Besides the personal reasons, from a business standpoint, it would seem to me that you use the term showstopper. And I think the various things that you brought up are showstoppers. And I don't think you need to make a lengthy report. I think you've got to bring that out and say, listen, these are showstoppers. I think the financial aspects of it, if included in that, are some of the health issues, some of the legal issues, some of the decrease in real estate values, make it, you know, a non-fly kind of project. The other thing that you haven't spent a lot of time on, and I didn't see included in there, was to really understand where the technology is going. I can tell you at IBM, within the next 5 years, we've developed in the labs the ability to capture energy from water moving through pipes. I don't know if you read about that in the paper, because annually we give our predictions of what's going to happen in the next 5 years. But it almost seems to me, when you develop what you guys are talking about, it's like all of us sitting in a room saying, you know, let's design a new car. My old Ford's getting 20 miles a gallon. Let's spend all this time, effort, energy, you know, all the aggravation associated with developing a car that gets 40 miles a gallon. And about halfway through, some guy drives past you in a Prius, like I own, it gets 50 to 60 miles to the gallon. So I think unless you understand where all the technologies are going on a worldwide basis, you can't even, your recommendation is time out, we ought to not do anything with this and reevaluate it in 3 to 5 years. I just think that doing anything other than that, other than talking to the experts at MIT and all the other institutions around the country that are working on energy, that, you know, it's just a lot of effort, a lot of time on your behalf. That's, you know, that's fine. I would hope you'd have more important things to do. This is a a no-go kind of situation if you analyze it from a lot of different angles. And the last comment I would make is, when people talk about the stock market, they say, well, the market anticipates what's going to happen in 6 months or 9 months. Take a look at the value of the stocks of companies that make and install wind turbines. And you'd see stocks that have gone from 20, 30 to 1 and 2. So this is not a technology that the smart people on Wall Street think will be used to generate energy as we go forward. I mean, that alone should be, wait a minute, do we, a little town like Lenox, want to make this kind of investment? I don't think so. That's it.
You know, can I just say that we have been tasked with a certain mission, and I think it's important for us to do as complete a report as we can, because that's what we accept. That's a job we accepted. And I think one of the reasons we need personal statements or statements from both sides compiled is because there are going to be differences of opinion about this and about recommendations to the town. Those kind of comments, like yours, are going to be extremely important at the Board of Selectmen meeting where they get this report and, or where they decide to talk about this report. Because they're the ones who really are going to have to act on this. And,
Show up.
yeah, so please show up for that.
When is it?
Well, we don't, we'll be turning in the final report on the, what did we say, 15th of February.
Yeah, 15th is what tentatively.
Yeah.
But that'll change. I will only say one thing. You're obviously saying stuff that I do and believe in, but there was here this future work, I mean, the possible effect of future technology and regulatory developments on it. So one of the committee members not here tonight, Jim Harwood, has asked consistently why now questions. And we haven't got good answers to it.
Well, that's my point. We don't have good answers for a lot of this stuff, so and I agree, you were tasked with a job to create a report, but that doesn't mean it has to be lengthy. I mean, in your judgment, after the analysis of those key areas, you determined it doesn't make any sense at this time. It ought to be very short and sweet, adjourned, thank you, moving on.
I think we also do feel,
So you're taking Neil's report, and turning it into 2 sentences.
Well, I sit on a lot of boards, and trust me, I'd rather have a 2-sentence report if it's from people I respect that have done the
I
analysis
agree with
and spent hours and hours, and they say, no, it's no.
yeah, unfortunately, we also have the Western report. And the town has been basing its, whatever enthusiasm or initial impetus to even look into this comes from that. And so we do have to analyze this from the basis of the Western report, because that's the going information. And a lot of that needs addressing. So it does stretch it out a little longer than I wish we could, but I feel like we have to take on Weston pro or con.
Great, perfect. After you.
Yeah, I'm John Whitney from Richmond. I sent you, Ken, a letter on November 30th about the effect of blasting on the geology of the mountain. And is that?
Hasn't been circulated to me.
Okay, well, I'd asked for a response, I haven't gotten one. Very briefly, there are 19 homes on View Drive and Yoken Road up behind Bartlett's that are fortunate enough to have a water system that was installed about 60 years ago. And it comes from an underground spring about halfway up the mountain. And the DEP will tell you that this is the nicest water they've seen anywhere in the Commonwealth, and it is. It is absolutely pristine. There is no iron, no calcium. As a matter of fact, it's so pure that we have problems with the pH kind of vacillating back and forth, as you chemists may know, understand, occurs in very, very pure water. But all
Another
of
engineer speaking, by the way.
Pardon?
Another engineer speaking.
Yeah. As you probably know, most all of the wells that are dug by individuals' homes on that side of the mountain are full of iron and full of calcium. But the iron is very pervasive. And of course, that's deals with the history of the Richmond iron mines that went on for 100 years. There are 19 homes, and I'll tell you, all 19 water users are very concerned about blasting and what that would do to the geology, and would that shift, the rock formations a mile and a half away? We don't know, and I would urge, I guess I'm giving you another unknown, but would that shift it so that we suddenly destroy that great resource and we lose our water? So I would urge that you, and what I suggested in the letter was a geological survey. We need geological experts. Maybe blasting a mile and a half away doesn't move or cause those changes, but we're worried that it could.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I didn't pass that information on to the panel members.
I have copies with me if you want another one.
I think that would be a good idea.
I might just add, blasting, there's another aspect of blasting, and that's the chemical seepage that goes down into the rocks. from the blasting material, not just chip, so.
We've got second row.
My name is Ivan Kane. I am the father of Dr. Hanan Kane, also live in Richmond. And I am, of course, concerned about the direct impact because we would be within the circle. But I also want to know two things. And I don't know whether this is the purview of the committee or the selectmen. The major question I have is, what do the selectmen of Lenox think about their neighbors down the hill? Do they have something in mind for Richmond? Have they been in touch with Richmond? Are they going to cooperate with Richmond? And my specific question is, is your report going to evaluate the route? Is it going to talk about Reservoir Road? Because one of the things that concerns me is that you might be wanting to use Osceola Road. And you may have something in mind. That's out of the question. You're not going. We don't have to worry about that.
Thank God.
Okay, thanks.
I believe that was taken off.
Thanks.
As I recall, the report was,
Yeah, it was Doug.
Osceola Road was under consideration. It was taken
Yeah,
off.
Doug was the.
But as far as answering for the rest of the Board of Selectmen, I can't really do that. I think that what we're dealing with here is a process that would take some time with lots of public forum before we move forward. Not just what happens here at this panel, but with other others as well. And that would be my stand.
I also live in Richmond, and I'm related to the two gentlemen on either side, Deborah Kane.
It's a filibuster.
I heard something about buckets at the last meeting, and I wasn't quite sure what that was all about. But I hoped that there would be a bucket which would be devoted to what I would call moral problems, humanity problems, compassion problems. These problems that affect individuals whose lifestyle, whose the quality of their life will be directly affected by these turbines. That should also weigh heavily in your assessment of whether this should go forward or not. Naturally, I speak as someone who's within a mile of the nearest turbine and worried about the water effects. I'm so glad that he brought up the geological effects. Worried about the health effects. I have very high blood pressure. I'm extremely allergic to noise. And I bought this house at considerable expense to us that is very tranquil, very quiet, set apart at the base of Lenox Mountain, surrounded by woods, land trust property, thinking I had found paradise. The devil found me. He said, oh no. And here I am threatened by noise from above when I thought I was surrounded by quiet. These are the kinds of personal costs, and they apply to other people too, who invested in their homes and their lifestyles. People who've retired here because it's Massachusetts, the area where there should be more intelligent people per mile than anywhere else in America. But so what are we doing? We're putting up turbines on Lenox Mountain that threaten us in so many ways. Where is the Massachusetts intelligence in that? I really think I'm ready to go back to Pennsylvania. So I do want to talk about this bucket that seems to be an invisible bucket of social justice and social and moral concern for individuals.
Thank you.
Before anyone else speaks, I gotta go, and we don't have quorum when I walk out the door. So, meeting, basically ending the meeting.
Officially, feel free to stay.
And I want to say one last thank you for hearing us out.
Thanks for, you get a lot to come tonight.
Thank you very much, folks. Though the meeting is officially adjourned with the quorum, do you want to continue to have public?
We can have conversation, but the meeting's adjourned.
Yeah, I just had a question for Channing. You said that the people who've made...
I'm sorry, who are you?
I'm sorry, I'm Reeve White, I live in Lenox.
I'm sorry.
I had a question for Channing. You said that the people who have made, I think, very important and technical comments here this evening, 3 or 4 in particular, you said that they should come to the selectmen meeting and make their statements. Is it possible that they could write, I'll ask them, can they write this up, what they've said, but also would the selectmen then be able to receive this formally rather than having having to wait for somebody to come to a meeting who may or may not be able to show for various reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. You write a letter to the Board of Selectmen, it'll get read by the Board of Selectmen.
I would urge those of you who've spoken, particularly on technical and engineering matters, to do that for this purpose.
And if you can be at the meetings, I think voices are
Yeah,
very,
even
very
better,
important.
sure.
Aren't we being recorded?
And, well, and you have two members of the press here.